What I always tell people is at the core of it is your why. Why did you start up that company? That is your North Star. I think if you deeply understand that, everything else starts to fall into place. Your vision, your mission, your statement, that is what's going to guide you now into the next step, which is your messaging. And once you have those things into place and they're securely in place, it's so much easier to tell your story.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, disruptors, and creators who are making things happen. My name is Michael T. Johnson, and I'm here with my co-host Tyler Kelly, and we're at Venture Cafe Miami tonight. Venture Cafe being the largest gathering of innovators, entrepreneurs, creatives, people just making things happen and breaking through the status quo in the world. So if you're near Venture Cafe City and they gather all around the globe on a Thursday evening, I suggest you go and check it out. So tonight we have Angela Betancourt with us. Angela, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Angela, welcome.
Thank you.
Angela is an international communications professional with over 12 years of experience developing, managing, and executing comprehensive, multicultural, and integrated communication campaigns and strategies within the U.S. and international markets.
Yes.
And so I would love to talk about all of that.
Sure.
Yeah, and just what are you excited about right now in the international communications?
There's so much I'm excited about. And I think globalization lends a lot to that. I think that the world is just so much more connected. And with everything that's going on with large businesses branching out into new markets and what that means, not just for the business landscape, but also culturally and for the youth and different generations coming up and how that defines the dynamics in those markets, I find it fascinating.
So talk to me about the nature of media relations today. And just like how it's changed, just with things getting more digital, like are those relationships still valuable? Are they relevant? Like just all of the above.
I think one of the biggest things in terms of media relations, it used to be, said organization or business trying to get their stories placed in whatever the print publication was, and that was it. You just crank stuff out and sent those press releases via fax or whatever it was back in the day, and that was essentially the relationship. You just kind of put news out there and tried your best to understand what the publications were going to cover with editorial calendars and building relationships. But the biggest thing that has changed of that, actually two things. One thing is everyone's pretty much their own publishing media brand right now. You don't have to wait for someone to post your content or cover your press release. You can do that on your own and start building relationships directly with your audience, right? So that having to depend so much on the media to get your stories placed is no longer as crucial as it used to be, because now you have so many other platforms and ways to do that, right? You have influencers now that you can build relationships with in terms of helping you tell your story. You also have bloggers and just a variety of platforms. And I think some of the things that we've seen, unfortunately, are a lot of journalists lose their jobs. But the upside of that has been so many new types of publications online that provides for infinite story placements, right? Back in the day, you had newspapers and you had magazines and you had the columns, and once the formatting was done, that was pretty much about it. But now with internet, you can just post stories. You don't have to necessarily adhere to a particular publication or printing schedule. And so it just really opens that up in terms of what's possible in media relations today. And it's not to say that, having a journalist or, a key publication in your industry not tell your story is not important. It very much is. But I think that there are so many other ways to approach that now. And in terms of traditional media relations, in the sense of getting your stories in their print or their online publication, the one thing that's never changed is the relationship. you still need to have the relationships with, whether it's an influencer or a writer, or freelance writer, or a blogger, vlogger, whatever. You still do need to nurture and build those relationships and understand how your story fits into whatever it is that conversation is you're trying to have.
So, like, is it hard to break into PR because of that? Like, it's all about, like, you've been in it for over a decade.
Yeah.
Which means that you've been in it that long, which means you have relationships.
Yes.
Is it difficult for somebody like starting out to build those relationships? Like, is there like a wall between, somebody that wants to get placement versus the people in those positions? Or tell me about that.
I think that's an interesting question, because I think a lot of journalists and writers, they change very quickly, right? So I've worked with editors and different writers, for example, Entrepreneur Magazine in 2009, and the writer there has since moved on. So, and they've gone into PR or whatever the case may be. So I think it's kind of interesting, because you have things like Twitter now that make it easier to start tracking down where some of these journalists might have moved to. It's easier to keep track of where people are, and people are a lot, they broadcast more. So I think it's easier now than it was, I would say, even 6 or 7 years ago. But some of the fundamentals in terms of building those relationships are still the same, right? You want to approach them respectfully and not spam them with things. You want to understand what they're writing, read their stuff. It's amazing. I hear journalists all the time talking about, no one even read my articles. They don't even know my writing style, and they're pitching me these random things. And so it's really about just paying attention and listening and being authentic with your approach. And I think that will help build these relationships.
So many people will say PR is dead, and I think what they mean by that is the big old PR agencies of the past are no longer, viable. But what is working and what's, prevalent in the marketplace is consultancies and shops like yours. So tell me about like that transition from working like in a corporate environment to starting your own thing.
Yeah, so I think to an earlier point that you mentioned, I think what's really interesting about what's happening at agencies right now is the traditional agency as it used to be has evolved tremendously. A lot of agencies now incorporate a lot more, because it's not just about PR. It's really about this kind of integrated communications mix or marketing mix that you hear. So it really encompasses social media, online content, creating websites, influencers. It's not just media relations. It's a lot of different things. It's graphic design. So you have these full service agencies now that I think is really, and throughout the years I've seen this trend happening. So I'm not surprised, and I should have called this out louder back in the day that this was how things were going to be going. But what's been interesting about my journey, it's taken me through a lot of learning experiences. I worked for a big company just out of college, Fairmont Hotels. So it's, big global company. And there was a hotel right here in Aventura that I worked for. And I was the assistant to the director of public relations, learned so much from my boss there, and kind of delved into that corporate world in the hospitality space, but just kind of understanding all these different departments and hierarchies and things like that. And then I had an opportunity to do a program up in Boston, and I still needed to work, but I needed to live on campus in order to do this thing. So I thought, okay, what if I just branch out on my own and just do my own thing? I'm in my 20s. If not now, then when? And let's just take the chance, and I'm going to try to find some clients. And I did. I started finding clients through my network of people, just sharing what I was trying to do, asking them to refer me to anybody. If I win, I win. It's my win. If I fail, it's absolutely my fail, right? When you have bigger companies behind you and people working alongside of you, there is that kind of shared wins and failures, if you will. So these I knew were going to be entirely my own. And I was excited about that. And I was ready for that challenge. And I got to do some very cool things at that time. In fact, I even had to a point where I did hire like 2 people, not on a full time, but just to assist me, because I had a lot of stuff going on, and that was very exciting for me to be able to do that, go to Boston, do what I was going to go do there, continue to meet amazing people. And on that kind of entrepreneurship path throughout the years, I've had other little things that I've dabbled in also. For a while, I had this entertainment vlog with some friends, and that was pretty successful, I think, considering, my co-host and I had no idea what we were doing, but our camera person, Beverly, she was our guide, and that whole process in production and everything. And then I launched a t-shirt company with a friend of mine called Geeky Seduction. And it was all about promoting being smart is sexy. And so that was the t-shirt. So my journey has been quite interesting, and I've always appreciated the opportunities to try new things and stretch myself, and of course then by default become the comms person of said business and promote that. But yeah, consulting has been eye-opening. It's been eye-opening. It's been an incredible learning opportunity. It's given me the opportunity to work with a lot of different kinds of people. I've traveled, so that was amazing. And I don't know if we wanted to get into this now, but one of the bigger consulting things that I've ever done was going to Sierra Leone on this private sector development program. I was a communications consultant on this program there, and that was life-changing.
So from working in corporate PR and communications, doing your own thing, entrepreneurial journeys that maybe were not 100% related,
right?
And then consulting, what kind of skills or what have you learned that you feel like kind of transcends all those different skill sets that are applicable?
I think one of the biggest things for me, and it actually set the trajectory for where I really see just myself as a communicator going, is how important the communications marketing function really is to an organization's bottom line. And for a long time, and actually, this first job that I had out of college, I got laid off from this first job, right? The communications department was like, first one to go. And I'm sitting here thinking, that's crazy. I think that should be the last one to go, because it's super important, I think, to the bigger picture of things. And there was always this understanding kind of permeating around that the marketing and PR people are the first ones to go in these big businesses. And I always had issues with that. And it was really special for me to see, especially in Sierra Leone and the phenomenal work I got to do there with this incredible group of people, was the PR, the communications function is so important. And the communication strategy and everything that encompasses is so important to how a business gets from point A to point B and how it improves its bottom line. That was very, very important for me to see happen and to realize. And I kind of always felt it, but didn't really have the case study, if you will, of how that actually worked itself out. And so I really think, and then I did this wonderful master's program in all of 2018. So right when I came back from Sierra Leone, I kind of jumped into this master's program. But that program was really rooted in that space of how important the communications role really is, meaningful, and how it can actually have impact in a deep way in an organization.
Yeah, I mean, we believe that the story, is really how you connect, how you inspire, how you transmute wisdom, how you build a community, how you increase your profits or decrease, depending on the story and how you tell it. Right. So communication, messaging, it's really at the heart of every business, successful business and unsuccessful business, right? Yeah,
exactly. And that's something that I'm a big advocate of and want to always talk about, because it's so important. And the storytelling, the message, the content, all of these things add up to how your company is perceived, how your audience interacts with you, what are you leaving behind, what experiences are you creating. All of those things drive bottom line.
So let's talk about Sierra Leone.
Sure.
And the communication challenge. I mean, from what I could tell, you were there in the midst of the Ebola crisis.
Yeah, well, luckily I was there towards the end of the Ebola crisis, but major props to my colleagues who were there in the height of it and who were really kind of living the day-to-day of what that was when it was really kind of at its biggest, what's the word I'm thinking of, point. And when I got there, there were about 40 cases left. And they were, the country had figured out what to do, and you had the international community come in and help. So I got there, there was still this no touching policy. And I tell this story a lot because I'm very touchy and huggy and all of that. And if I meet someone and my boss who hired me there at the time, we had spoken a million times over Skype, and I just felt like I knew her. So when I finally got to see her, I just wanted to give her a hug. And it was like this whole thing. It's like, there was still this no touching policy, which is just bizarre for me to try to understand that. But that didn't last too much longer after I got there. So that was good.
So what did that experience there teach you about communication?
Oh, so much. I think on a media level, it was extremely interesting because the media landscape there it's changing, it's improving, I think, but so much of the media there is kind of pay to play, and the editorial and advertising departments are really one and the same. And then publications get stuck in this spiral of accepting money for whatever article because they need the money to keep things going. But in doing so, I think the bigger companies, the hotels, the telephone companies, the ones that have a lot of money are not investing or buying ads because it's not good for them to be associated with publications that are not, slanderish and all of these things. So that was a very interesting thing to see. And I had the opportunity to work with a new and the first business publication in the country to try out some different business models that can then be replicated across the whole media landscape. So it was kind of looking at how can we work with this publication, make it profitable, and then show everyone else that this can work in this market and this is how that can be done. So in that process, it was a media platform. So yes, it did fall in communications, but it was really about business operations. And we had our business expert, who's one of our team members, work with me on how can, looking at the numbers, looking at the model, when the publication was going out, how can we reduce print costs? How can we, and all of these different factors. So it was really business. But in order to make this publication successful, it was all about the operations of it. And to really be able to sit there through that process and understand that process was, again, kind of another example of that kind of intersection of communications and the business and the business model. And then there was a lot of developing the messaging around that publication. So I learned so much about the media landscape, and it opened my eyes to how well it works in the United States and in other countries. Not to say publications are perfect, but in terms of the revenue model. And it was interesting to see that that's not happening everywhere in a free country, in a democratic free country, to see that model there, kind of broken model, was interesting to me. So
we've covered a lot of ground and talked about a lot of stuff from like the way that communications has changed over the years, or from your experience where it would seem to me you have to know not just about communication, but you have to know about business. You have to know about all these different things to be effective, which could seem overwhelming. So if I'm an organization, a personal brand, a company, an entrepreneur, where do I start with all this?
I think you start with, and that's actually a really interesting question. If you have your own, if you're just getting started, the entrepreneur does wear a lot of hats, right? Especially early on. It's just part of the deal. A lot of the things that I've learned with Adobe Suite, which is like I'm obsessed with, I just learned it because it was necessary for me to understand that. And so yes, the entrepreneur, the startup, the solopreneur, lots and lots of hats that you're wearing. From a communication standpoint, I would start off with the first thing is the why of what you're doing. I think if you deeply understand that, everything else starts to fall into place. Your vision, your mission, your statement, how you want to position yourself, then those things help build on, okay, now what does the logo look like and what colors reflect that sentiment you're trying to express through your business. So it could be overwhelming, but what I always tell people is at the core of it is your why. Why did you start up that company? That is your North Star. That is what's going to guide you now into the next step, which is your messaging. And once you have those things into place and they're securely in place, it's so much easier to tell your story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like if you're in touch with your purpose or your why, that the rest of it, from what you're saying, might be like pretty intuitive.
Yeah.
Besides like the really specialized pieces.
Yeah. I've worked with I've worked with some startup companies that are talking to me about their logo design, and I'm like, okay, let's take 10 steps back. They're really struggling with the logo design. How do we do this? And I want it to look, such and such a way. And here's 4 different mock-ups, and I don't know about the colors. And I'm thinking, pause on that for a second and tell me about your business. 3 hours later, we're still talking about the business, right? And then it was very clear why there was so much struggle with this logo. And the logo is a very important thing. I mean, I never take it lightly in terms of how does the logo develop, right? But it's 10 times more difficult than it already is when you really don't know why you're doing what you're doing and who's your message, what's your message, who's your audience. And so I always take 10 steps back with people. It's always interesting to see how people want to get to the sexy stuff. Let's design the website. And I'm thinking, wait a second. First, we need to even know what pages you want to have, what content do you want to have before we start talking about website design.
So I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. And when you had sent us some stuff before the show, and you said that, I think it said you were a recovering worrier. Is that what you said?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Talk about someone who worries a lot. I used to worry all the time. I mean, intensely worry about everything. I don't think it came from like anyone particular in my family. I think my family had moderate levels of worryingism, but that's not a word. I'm just making up words at this point. But I genuinely worried about so many things. Just kind of growing up, probably started in my teenage years. And then that's another therapy conversation. Who knows where that stemmed from. But yeah, I was worried about putting stuff out there to the world, which is crazy because I'll be the first one to get on a plane and go anywhere by myself. I don't even think anything of it. I think it's perfectly normal for me to do that. I'm not even worried about what's going to happen when I get there. But I think when it comes to, because I'm recovering, about the type of content that I want to put out there and how I want to represent myself, and reflecting on the times I've done that for other people and now trying to turn that on myself was difficult, very difficult. And I worried about not coming across the right way, and is this the right thing? And it's difficult when it's so internally focused, right? So sometimes I just have to get out of my head a little bit and be a little bit just more objective, if that's possible, with myself and my own things.
So how did you overcome that? Did you just push through it, execute?
I'm still working on it. There's that quote, if you're afraid of something, do it anyway, or something like that. I really stick to that. I know it's kind of a platitude or whatever, but it's helpful to me. Do something that scares you every day. I think it's very wise words. And so I really stick to that. And I get out of my own way. When the moment that I say, you know what, I'm just going to put this out there anyway, forget, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to cringe, but I'm going to do it. And I feel so much better for it after that. So I'm still working on it. I'm not 100% cured from my worries, but I'm getting there, making progress.
I like to think of fear as like the indication that I need to go in that direction. Like if you look at it that way, it changes the perspective.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, that means it's new. That means there's a lot of uncertainty. It means you haven't done it before. And that's always a good thing, I think, to grow and expand and to push yourself. So it's always interesting to me because, I went to Thailand by myself and had a great time. Hadn't been there before. I just went on a whim. I was in Singapore and just decided I'm going to go to Thailand. And I did. I didn't have a hotel, I think, until on the way there or something. I was like looking on. So, and I just thought this is great. So it's interesting that, I try to take some of that spirit of adventure and my love of travel and my curiosities and try to push that more into kind of letting go of some of my worries on things that I want to put out there. So
there you go. Angela, how can people get in touch with you? Online, social media, all that good stuff.
Okay, you can follow me on Twitter at Angie Betancourt, on Instagram, which is not really related to my work, but fun stuff happens on there. And that's Angie B Travels, because I do post about my travels quite a bit. You can go to angelabetancourt.com to read a little bit more about me. And sometimes I post stuff on like the blog side there.
Awesome. Well, thank you. This has been a fascinating conversation. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co and be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. If you're in Miami, visit us at Venture Cafe on Thursday nights. You can find details at venturecafemiami.org and connect with us on social at We Are Slam and Venture Cafe MIA.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams